we finally got to see Shanks standing in Marijoa. The last time we saw the current timeline Shanks was during that whole incident with Bartholomew, but ever since the Elbaf arc began, his presence has slowly been increasing through the conversation and flashbacks. In the God Valley flashback, it was revealed that the Rocks carries the bloodline of the Davy clan, and with Teach inheriting that same bloodline, his importance in the story keeps rising. And now that Shanks is also being spotlighted, it really feels like the moment when the fates of the Red Hair Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates, who were one step away from clashing 2 years ago, is finally approaching. This chapter didn't show their first fight, but Oda Sensei dropped plenty of hints pointing toward it. So in this video, I want to dig into those details by looking directly at nuance of Japanese lines. On top of that, Neptune's line this week was boosted the theory that Mosako might actually be Shirahoshi. But when you compare Mosako's and Shirahoshi's speech patterns in Japanese, you find some interesting things. Recently there's been more content explaining Japanese language, but a lot of it relies only on translation device, and from native Japanese perspective, many of those explanations completely miss the mark. That's exactly why I started this channel, to explain what the characters and narrations really sounds like in the original Japanese version. And on my Dust published page, I break down every chapter's speech each week, their tone, their nuance, their word choice, and their wordplay. There are tons of interesting connections you simply can't see in the English version, so if you finish the chapter and want to raise the resolution a bit, definitely check out my translation breakdowns. This chapter revealed that the Shanks was in Marijoa 15 years ago, and I went to take a deeper look at why he went to the Holy Land at the first place. The first thing worth noting is that by this point, he already had this scar over his left eye. Since Shamrock said, "You can wait until your injury heals," we can safely assume he already had the 3 iconic claw marks that we know associated with Shanks. If we lay out that timeline, it becomes clearer. During Roger's execution 24 years ago, Shanks has no scar on his face. Even in Film Red, which is set 19 years ago, those 3 scratches above his left eye were not there yet. But in chapter 1152, when he visited Elba 14 years ago, the scar was already present. Which means Blackbeard had to have injured Shanks sometimes between 19 and 14 years ago, and I believe that incident happened right before Shanks went to Marijoa. The reason is simple. In this scene, Shanks tells Shamrock that he wants to learn more about the Holy Land, which suggests he hadn't been there long. And because Shamrock tells him, it's not too late to resume the investigation after your wound fully heals, it strongly implies Shanks came to Marijoa immediately after receiving that injury. This basically means there are an extremely high chance that the reason Shanks returned to Marijoa in the first place was his clash with Blackbeard. We don't know how much Blackbeard actually knows about the Celestial Dragons or the God's Knights, but since he's history nerd, he definitely has some level of awareness about the darker side of the world government. And on top of that, when he was 2 years old, he was literally being carried by rocks while being chased by the God's Knights. Even at age 2, a traumatic experience like that would burn itself into your memory, so it makes total sense that Blackbeard realized Shanks was the son of Figalan family and brought it up to him in that confrontation. We still don't know exactly when Shanks learned that he was part of the Celestial Dragon bloodline, especially the Figalan lineage. But talking with Blackbeard about it probably pushed him to solidify his decision to head for Marijoa. At the core of Shanks' motivation is fulfilling Roger's will. Roger wanted to turn world upside down, but he was executed before he could do it. So that means Shanks made up his mind to travel the world so he could learn everything he needed to one day fulfill Roger's will. And as he journeyed around, he must have started to see the darker side of the world government with his own eyes. To learn the true source of the world's darkness, the most logical move was to go straight to the place where that darkness originates, Marijoa. That's why he wanted to learn more about the Holy Land and why he was trying to officially join the God's Knights. Like Nasujiro said, if the day ever comes when you can become a knight, you'll finally get to see the deepest hidden layers of this world. And one of the answers Shanks found there was Nika. Yawul explained that Nika appears when the world is on the verge of collapse, and those in power throughout history have feared him. Shanks must have realized that God's Knights and the Gorosei were terrified of Nika's power, and the moment he understood that, he probably decided there was no longer any reason for him to stay in the Holy Land. He returned to the surface to gather information on Nika, which lines up perfectly with the fact that right after this, 14 years ago, he went to Elbaf and said he wanted to learn more. Elbaf is the place where Nika faith is the deepest in the world, and even Vegapunk, when explaining Nika, clarified that he is the sun god worshipped in Elbaf. And if we look at things this way, the next big question is what kind of situation led to Shanks and Blackbeard actually fighting in the first place? After all, at the time, Blackbeard was supposed to be a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, so the idea of him acting alone feels a little suspicious. This is where that famous line comes in. The idea that Blackbeard lives a twice the life of normal human. Ace said that about him, and it was probably his way of describing the fact that Blackbeard has never slept a single day in his life. In other words, while the Whitebeard pirates were asleep at night, Blackbeard would slip off the ship and carry out whatever secret plans he had on his own. So just like how Shanks slipped into Marijoa at midnight to help Fisher Tiger, Blackbeard likely used the dead of the night as his own free time to move independently and prepare for the moment he would one day take the Yami Yami no Mi. If you've been watching this channel since last year, you probably remember that we've talked for a long time about Shanks having some kind of connection with the world government. Not because he's their ally, but because he's a guy who's trying to understand the government from the inside so he can carry out Roger's will. And now that it's been confirmed that Shanks actually lived in Marijoa, and that he even helped Fisher Tiger free the slaves, it pretty much proves that our theory wasn't off at all. Even 2 years ago, when the Gorosei realized Shanks was meeting Whitebeard, they said, 赤髪は暴れさせればこそ手に負えんが、自分から世界をどうこうしようという男でもあるまい。Meaning, he's dangerous even he goes wild, but he's not the kind of guy who wants to overturn the world on his own. Sengoku also said, if it's you, I'll allow it red hair. お前ならいい赤髪 during Marineford War, which already showed that Shanks keeps a certain distance while still maintaining the relationship with the world government. On the other hand, when Garp blew up at Luffy saying, 赤髪なんぞに毒されおって, it's obviously because Shanks pushed Luffy toward the pirate's path. But more than that, it's probably because Shanks is the son of the very same celestial dragons Garp calls maggots. That alone would set Garp off. And when I posted that video saying, the person who met with Gorosei was Shanks, a lot of people insisted it was Shamrock instead. Some even said things like, stop dirtying Shanks, he's not evil, or this guy is just contrarian. Whenever you post a video that rides a trend, those people who only look at the thumbnail and title without watching the actual content start flooding in. But the viewers of Dawn, Dusk and this channel, LunaPienArt, are different. Most of you are 25 years old or older, and many of you are into Japanese nuance and translation. You are so sharp. Including you, the people who watch this channel understand that the world runs on complicated motivates, and isn't just simple good versus evil story. So even if Shanks has connection to the world government, you immediately understand that I'm not pushing some evil Shanks agenda. You know, the situation is way more layered than that. Like we've been saying since way back, this channel's basic stance on Shanks is this. Shanks is a man who has spent his entire life trapped between the world of pirates and the world of the government. When Gaban called him Unmei no Ko, a child of fate, he wasn't being poetic, he meant that Shanks has unbelievably usual background. A celestial dragon by blood raised by the pirate who carried the will of thee. And on top of that, Shanks accepted all of it and chose to shoulder an insanely important role in the One Piece world, going so far as to walk into Marijoa on his own to carry out Roger's will. Another detail that really stands out this time is how Shanks behaved toward Harold, that cold, arrogant attitude, basically looking down on the regular humans like any celestial dragons would. And earlier, he even told Shamrock, I always felt like I wasn't like the people around me, and I wasted 24 years of my life. That's clearly him hiding his true intentions and acting the part of Celestial Dragon to gain their trust. Because right at the beginning of the flashback, in the scene from 14 years ago, Shanks told Gaban, I got along with Harold a bit back in Marijoa. But nothing in the Shanks we just saw matches at all in this chapter. Harold watches Shanks walk away with that arrogant attitude, and you can tell he senses something. Especially in this scene. He realizes Shanks isn't speaking from that heart, and most likely, once the eyes of Shamrock, Goring, and the other God's Knights weren't on him, Shanks met up with Harold in secret and exchanged words with him. It might even be from those quiet conversations with Harold that Shanks first learned about Nika. And here's another interesting detail. By the time Shanks came to Marijoa, he had already formed the Red Hair Pirates. We know Shanks visited Shurop Village 22 years ago, and 3 years after that, 19 years ago, Yasop officially joined the Red-Haired Pirates. So during the period Shanks was living in Marijoa, the Red-Haired Pirates already existed as a crew. Which means Beckman, Luckyru, Yasop, and the other core members must have already understood Shanks' true intentions and the bigger plan behind all of his actions. If that's the case, then Beckman's line in chapter 1st, 聖者でも相手にしているつもりか? You think you're going up against a saint or something? Suddenly takes on a different shade of meaning. A saint is supposed to be someone virtuous, noble, and moral example to others. But the ones who get that title, despite being the complete opposite of saints, are the Celestial Dragons. So that jab from Beckman almost sounds like Dirk Little in the joke about Shanks, a good-hearted pirate playing the role of Celestial Dragon. Right after that, when Shanks laughs it off and says, 俺たちは海賊だぜ? We are pirate after all. It even feels like he's answering Beckman's black joke. By the way, Higuma also said to Shanks, I've killed 56 people, punks like you. In Japanese fandom, this turned into a famous meme. The idea that Higuma secretly the strongest man alive because he killed 56 people, meaning he must have taken down 56 God's Knights or Yonko tiers monsters like Shanks. Knowing Oda Sensei, it wouldn't be surprising at all if the strongest guy in the first world or second world, Voice Century, actually did look like that. By the way, I put together a full timeline of Shanks' actions so far, and I'm sharing it on my Dusk publishing page. Shanks' mysterious left arm mark finally gets explained. It turns out it's the crest given to members of the Blaze of God, in the lower division that serves under the God's Knights. Harold receives this mark directly from the Five Elders, and the ritual itself is called Shallow Sea Contract, Senkai Keiyak. And apparently above that level, there are two higher pacts. That lines up with what we've already seen, because the difference in the devilish powers between the God's Knights and the Elders is massive. The God's Knights can use two terrifying abilities, Abyss, which let them warp instantly across the world, and an undying body that regenerates from any attack. And what's wild is that even Devilfoot user can gain those on top of their original ability. For example, during the God Valley incident, Gunko appeared as one of the Blades of God, and she already had the Arrow Arrow no Mi, Arrow Arrow Fruit at that point. After forming a deep sea contract with Im and officially becoming a God's Knight, she gained both Abyss and Undying Body as additional powers. From what we've seen, the Gorosei don't just have the Abyss and the Undying Body. It really looks like they've also got the power to stop aging altogether. If you look at the guys like Girling or Summers, it's obvious that they've been aging normally over the years. But the Gorosei, when you compare them to how they looked 38 years ago, they are basically unchanged. On top of that, we already know Saturn has been alive since 200 years ago, and that's exactly why Gunko becomes such an interesting case here. Even though she's a member of God's Knight, she seems to have been given the same ageless body as Gorosei. You can tell this because she looks almost exactly the same as she did 38 years ago. And if the woman who appeared 56 years ago as Im's close-eyed was actually her, then it becomes even more obvious that she was granted some sort of ageless power. Maybe even a contract at the same level as the one the Gorosei have. I mentioned this before, but there's a good chance Gunko is someone who Im shows special affection toward. From everything we've seen, Im clearly has a deep attachment to Lily. Nefertiti Lily, to the point of displaying what looks like her portrait in their own room. On top of that, Im also seems to have taken a liking to Vivi, Lily's distant descendant, and even gave orders to bring her in. If Lily really did have the blue hair like Vivi, then Im might be seeing that same trace of Lily in Gunko's blue hair as well. And maybe that's why Im keeps her in the permanently young form, because she carries that echo of Lily. Another thing I really want to highlight is this. Only 13 people who are able to form a contract that ranks above Shallow Sea contract. If we think about it in the simplest way, the Gorosei make up 5 of them, so that would leave 8 spots for God's Knights. And in the God Valley flashback, the God's Knights who appeared on site were 7. So where did the remaining one go? When we check the titles, something interesting pops up. In this chapter, we learn that 20 years ago, Gerwin held the position of Dancho, which means captain of the God's Knights. But in the current timeline, his title Supreme Commander, Saiko Shireikan, and the captain role has been passed down to Shamrock. Of course, these titles can vary depending on the organization, but generally speaking, captain, Dancho in Japanese, is the leader of the group, the one who's actually on the ground giving orders to the team. Meanwhile, Gerwin's current title is Saiko Shireikan, Supreme Commander. This is typically someone who does not go to the front lines. They are the one who oversees the entire organization, including the captain, from other locations and issues orders from above. In other words, during the God Valley incident, Gerwin was the one giving direct orders to the God's Knights, making him the captain at that time. And on top of that, there should have been the Supreme Commander situated at Marijoa, overseeing the whole God's Knights unit from afar. If we consider that, the numbers line up perfectly. The God's Knights would have been 8 in total. And those 8 together with the Gorosei would make the 13 people who held contracts higher than the Shallow Sea contract 38 years ago. The most likely scenario is that the former Supreme Commander either died of old age or was killed in the battle, which led to Gerwin moving up to take that role, Supreme Commander. And with God's Knight's one position vacant, Gunko probably stepped in to fill the newly opened spot. And right now, the lines up of the God's Knights goes like this. Saiko Shireikan, Supreme Commander, Gerwin. Dancho, Captain, Shamrock. As for the regular members, we currently know Gunko, Somers, and Kiringham. That means 3 members are still unknown. It's possible that someone who showed up during the God Valley incident is still holding one of those positions, or maybe we'll see completely new recruits. Either way, we can only look forward to seeing who shows up next. And in this chapter, we get a conversation between Neptune and Harold, and since Harold used the word Mosa Mosa to describe Neptune's daughter, it's easy to understand why the fandom is now buzzing with the theory that the Mosako Loki mentioned might actually be Shirahoshi. On this channel, we've talked before about how, when you read the Japanese carefully, Mosako's way of speaking gives off a surprisingly feminine vibe. Back then, people commented things like, wasn't Loki just talking to a hairy guy? Isn't that why the Denden Mushi was Mosa Mosa? But like I explained before, that was simply cold resistant Denden Mushi. It doesn't reflect the traits of the person on the other end of the call. So is Mosako actually Shirahoshi? The possibility is definitely there. But what personally bothered me is the nuance of Japanese itself. If you read the Japanese version, Shirahoshi's speech pattern is extremely distinctive. Most of the time she uses a polite speech, very polite, to the point where it sometimes sounds unnatural, and mix into that a little burst of childish phrasing. Mosako, on the other hand, speaks like a fully grown adult woman. Her speech doesn't have Shirahoshi's overly formed quirks, and she doesn't slip into childish tones either. Because of that, I still think it's very possible that Shirahoshi and Mosako are actually 2 different people.
LunaPiena tends to overlook things, so let me add a bit more explanation. First of all, Shirahoshi speaks in extremely polite language, even to her brothers and her father. On top of that, she spent about 10 years practically confined and even said, "The only one I've been able to talk to is Megalo." Meanwhile, Loki told Mosa, "You and I have been friends for a long time. So, as long as they're not lying, the chances of Mosa actually being Shirahoshi are pretty low at this point." LunaPiena, make sure you explain things properly next time, alright?
And the thing that the chapter title was pointing to was this final scene. What happened is that Ida ended up being poisoned as a result of a plot carried out by the giants of Sake Village, the homeland of Estorida, the former lawful wife of Harald. Apparently, Harald kept begging the elders of Elbaf over and over to make Ida his new official wife. Once the giants of Sake Village found out about this, they acted to stop it. After she was poisoned, Ida's condition got worse by the day, and because of that, the turban at Elbaf's port had been closed for a while. That's when Loki showed up with the meat for Ida. As you all already know, Loki has a very contrarian personality. He says the exact opposite of what he truly feels. He's basically doing the same thing Shanks was doing in Marijoa in this chapter, acting one way while real feelings are completely different. Outwardly, he calls Ida a hag from outside, but deep down, he truly thought of her as his only mother. He brought the meat entirely for her sake. The turban had been closed for days, so he must have gone out to get food because he was worried about her. Even from this alone, you can really see how kind-hearted Loki is at his core. Loki is fundamentally a gentle giant, but the problem is that he admires Nika, the gods of destruction, and of course he is also smack in the middle of puberty. So what he really feels and what he says or does don't always line up, which honestly makes him kind of adorable as a character. All the pranks he'd pulled in Elbaf up until now were probably just him trying to mimic the stories about Nika being a troublemaker. And even this time, when he destroyed the Sake village, part of it might be from what innocent desire to become like Nika. But more than anything, it was probably the rage or sorrow he felt toward Estrida for abandoning him to the underworld, and the grief and fury of having his one and only mother taken from him. Loki definitely has a clumsy, awkward personality, but on top of that, he also wants to the people around him to see him as the god of destruction Nika. And because he absolutely hates letting anyone see his true feelings, he never explained the real meaning behind his action up until now. When Mosako accidentally touched on his kindness inside him, he reacted with extreme rejection, almost like he was terrified of being exposed. Because of this personality, the giants of Elbaf and even Hyrule have completely misunderstood him as having a terrible attitude. But when you actually look at this chapter, it's obvious that deep down he's just a gentle soul. Even the Harald murder case at Ol's castle, which happened the following year, Loki knew the truth behind it, but he still didn't tell the other giants. That was probably because he wanted to protect his pride as the destructive Nika, and because his own personality wouldn't allow him to reveal he's actually kind-hearted person. That instinct to hide his real feelings must have stopped him from opening up. Honestly, a guy like Loki probably needs to hear those words straight from Luffy. Did anyone watch yesterday's video? I asked whether jump is sold in your country, and it turns out that in most places it isn't. And even if it is, the price is insanely high. Plus, there are also lots of limited time anime and manga collaboration items here in Japan. And I've been thinking about whether there's some kind of good service I can create for people who want those items, like this one, Shonen Jump with One Piece cover. Of course, Japan is dealing with a huge, resale problem right now, and personally, I don't want to buy up limited merch in the way that feels unethical. If I came up with a good idea, I'll share it here on this channel, or Dawn Dusk channel. Also, I bought a few copies of this Jump issue with a special cover, so maybe at some point I'll run little competition for someone who want one. I'd happy if you'd share your opinion. And I'd like to keep doing this kind of community interaction through Dawn Dusk Publish as well, so feel free to come hang out. Alright, that's it for now. I'll see you again in the next video.